Hello and welcome to lesson 11 of this basic biblical Greek course. Today we are looking at third declension nouns. So we'll do an overview of them. Thereafter I will introduce you to 4 helpful hints that will aid you in your learning of these nouns. Thereafter we will dive into the various third declension noun endings together and do some examples of these nouns. Finally, we'll finish with vocab and some translation work as we've become accustomed to doing in this course. So if you're ready, grab your cup of coffee and let's get going. Well, as we begin today's lesson, I'd like to have a look at an overview of the declensions that we've done so far, and then compare them to the third declension which we are doing today. So if you remember, first declensions are characterized as having feminine genders, and they are first declension because their stems end with vowels. Specifically, they end with either an alpha or an eta. On the other hand, second declensions are nouns that are either characterized as having a masculine or a neuter gender, and their stems also end with a vowel, specifically an omicron. Now today we are looking at the last of the declensions, which is the third declension, and these nouns can be any gender, so they can be feminine, masculine, or neuter. And then they are also characterized as having stems that end with a consonant. So there is 2 big differences between the third declension and the first and second declensions. They can be any gender and their stems end with a consonant. So third declension nouns are generally the most difficult nouns to learn, and that is because they have 3 genders and different patterns. So here are 3 special challenges that third declension nouns will present us with. Challenges though that we will be able to overcome. The first one is that the gender cannot necessarily be known from the lexical form. But don't be dismayed or discouraged when you hear that. Remember, like any noun, the third declension noun will be accompanied by an article, and the article never lies, so it will greatly assist us with determining the gender of the third declension noun that we are working with. The second special challenge is that the stem cannot be known from the nominative singular, and because of that we will have to learn the genitive singular form as well. But we'll speak more about that when we look at the hints to learn the third declension nouns. Then the last special challenge is the form of the dative plural varies because of the sigma of the ending often interacts with the final letter or letters of the noun stem. So what you're going to find is in the dative plural, there are times when amalgamation will take place. So now that you are familiar with some of the challenges that third declension nouns presents us with, and that we are going into this lesson with our eyes open, let's take a look at an example together. So allow me to give you an example of a third declension noun and make you aware of some of the challenges that these nouns present. So the example that I'd like to use is sarx, which means flesh. And sarx is the nominative singular form. So how is this word actually built? How is it put together? Well, it consists of a stem, which is sa. The stem vowel is kappa. So that is why this is a third declension noun, because its stem vowel is a consonant. In this example, kappa. And it also has a case ending, which is sigma. So what you'll notice just by looking at how this word is built up is that the stem of sarks is actually sark. And so what has happened is that there has been an amalgamation that has taken place that has produced the nominative singular form sarks. And that amalgamation consists of the kappa and the sigma combining to form xi. So sark plus the sigma gives us our nominative singular form sarks. All right, so just by looking at the nominative singular form, you wouldn't have been able to know what the consonant of that word was. And so we have to just go back and put it together. But there is a way around this, and I will explain that to you in a short while. So because the stem of third declension nouns ends in a consonant, as you saw with the previous example with sarks, that consonant sometimes reacts to the first letter of the case ending, especially if the case ending begins with a sigma. So this is similar to what we learned about in lesson 7 when we talked about amalgamation in the future tense. So I just want to remind you of the different types of amalgamation that can take place. So for example, with the labials, when we have a P, a beta, or a phi that meet a sigma, they amalgamate and become a psi. Then the velars, we have kappas, gamma, chi, plus a sigma, that amalgamates and changes to a xi. And then the dentals, the tau, the delta, the theta, or the zeta, plus a sigma, remains a sigma. William Mounce, in his excellent book, Basics of Biblical Greek Grammar, provides 4 helpful hints to be able to learn third declension nouns. So I'd like to teach you these 4 helpful hints that he has given us. The first one is memorize the genitive singular form with the nominative singular form. And the reason for this is because of the changes that take place in the nominative singular, it is often difficult to determine the stem of a third declension noun. So just go back to the example that we did with sarks. Sarks is the nominative singular form, and just by knowing that by itself, we wouldn't be able to know what the stem was of that noun. So what is the solution? The solution to this problem is always to memorize the genitive singular form with the lexical form. So if you drop the genitive singular case ending, you will normally have the words stem. So let's go back to our example of sarks. So sarks is the nominative singular or lexical form, and sarkos is the genitive singular form. And if we drop the ending, the omicron sigma, we are left with the stem, which is kappa. Okay, so the first helpful hint is when you memorize third declension nouns, memorize both the nominative singular form and the genitive singular form. The second helpful hint is this: whatever happens in the nominative singular also happens in the dative plural. So in both the nominative singular and the dative plural, amalgamation takes place. And just a note here, this is because the dative plural case ending also begins with a sigma. So we have here our nominative singular, example of sarks. So we have sark, and we see there that the consonant is kappa plus the sigma. Amalgamation takes place, and we get our nominative singular form sarks. And in the dative plural, we have sark plus the sigma iota case ending, and that becomes sarksi. So on the right hand side, we can just check that. This falls under the velars. So this is a kappa plus the sigma iota, and we end up with xi iota. Let us quickly look at the last 2 helpful hints. The third helpful hint is a new drops out when followed by a sigma. So look at these two examples. We have 10 plus the sigma, we end up with tis. And the second example, we have 10 plus c, we end up with tc. And then the last helpful example, a tau drops out if it is at the end of a word or when it is followed by a sigma. So look at the first example. We have onomat, right, plus no case ending. We end up with onoma. And then the second example, we have onomat plus the c. We end up with onomasi. Right, so those four helpful hints are important to know. So make sure that you are familiar with them before we move on to the various patterns. So third declension nouns have three sets, or if you like to think of them as patterns. The first set involves the masculine and feminine third declension nouns. Set 2, or sometimes referred to as the A pattern, involves only neuter nouns. And set 3, or sometimes referred to as pattern B, also involves neuter nouns. So let's take a look at the first set together. So set 1 includes masculine and feminine endings. All right, so these words are a combination of masculine and feminine third declension nouns. So in this table here are the actual endings that I would encourage you to learn off by heart, as they will help you with declining the various third declension nouns. So let's have a look at the singular endings first. The nominative. Some grammar books will simply say there is no case ending, and some will say that it is the sigma because amalgamation generally takes place. So I like to think of this case ending as the sigma. Then the genitive form is os, or sometimes eos. The eos being the feminine third declension nouns generally. The dative is iota, and the accusative is either alpha or nu. And then the plural endings, the nominative is s or ace. The genitive is consistent once again, its own. The dative, as you've already seen, is sin, right? Because whatever happens in the nominative singular happens in the dative plural, because they both have the sigma. And then the accusative plural endings are us or ace. So generally speaking, for example here, if the genitive ending is os, then the accusative ending will be the alpha. And in the plural forms, if the ending is s, then the accusative ending would be us. Conversely, if the ending is ace, then the accusative ending will also be ace. So see if you can pick up those patterns as we go through them together. And then just a final note here. There are no new forms of the article for the third declension. The articles that have already been learned are used with all the nouns, pronouns, and adjectives regardless of declension. So in other words, we've already covered all the different articles and there are no new forms to introduce. All right, let's take a look at our first variation within the third declension nouns, and these are nouns that end with a kappa. So the example that we're looking at is the one that you should be familiar with by now, and it's sarx, sarkos, hey. So you see there that it has a feminine gender and it means flesh. I've also given us the masculine feminine set endings to help you to visualize how this word is declined. So the singular endings are going to be sigma, the genitive os, dative iota, accusative alpha. The plural endings, nominative s, genitive own, dative sin, and accusative os. All right, so let me just remind you of those two helpful hints that will come into play here. The first one is that you need to memorize the nominative singular as well as the genitive singular forms. And the second helpful hint is whatever happens in the nominative singular form is going to happen in the dative plural forms. All right, so in memorizing the genitive singular form, we can see that with this word, the stem of the noun is sark. So let me underline that for you so that you can see how the endings are attached. All right, so let's go through this together. All right, so nominative singular is sarks. And there we see that amalgamation has taken place between the kappa and the sigma. And whatever happens in the nominative singular also happens in the dative plural. So the dative plural form is sark-sin. And once again, because the ending is sin, begins with a sigma, we also have amalgamation that's taken place there. The genitive singular is sark plus the ending os, so we have sarkos. The dative singular is sark plus the iota, so we have sarki. And the accusative is sark plus the alpha, which is sarka. The nominative plural is sark-s. The genitive plural is sarkon. And then the accusative plural is sarkas. All right, so I'd like to say that this is quite simple at this point, and it is, especially if you know your endings. So if you've memorized the masculine, feminine endings, then it's simply a matter of attaching them to the stem of the noun. And the only irregularities that we have so far are in the nominative singular and in the dative plural. The rest are quite regular. Our next third declension noun ends with the consonant tau. So the example that we're looking at is charis, charitos, hey. All right, so it also has a feminine gender, and this is our very well-known word, grace. And this one also follows the same endings as sarks. So we have sigma, os, iota, alpha, and the plurals s, own, sin, and os. And what I've done here, just to remind you, is the article. So we have the feminine articles included here. So we have the singulars, hey, tais, te, and tain, and the plural forms, hi, tone, tais, and tas. By memorizing the genitive singular form, we see that our noun stem is charit, ending with a consonant tau. So let's go through the forms together. Nominative singular is charis. So there we have amalgamation where the tau has dropped out and we're left with the sigma. And the nominative and the dative plural, should I say, is charisi, all right, where the tau has amalgamated with a sigma and we're left with the sigma. All right, let's go through the genitive singular. We have charitos, dative singular, chariti, accusative singular, charita, nominative plural, charites, genitive, chariton, and the accusative plural, charitas. All right, so this one is very similar to sarks, and the only irregularities that we see there are in the nominative singular and in the dative plural. Our next variation of third declension nouns are when the consonant is a delta. So the example that we're looking at is alpis, alpedos, hey, all right, also has a feminine gender, and this word means hope. And as was the case with sarx and charis, the endings are the same. So we have the singulars, we have sigma, genitive os, dative iota, and the accusative alpha. And the plural endings, we have s, own, sin, and us. All right, so once again, I've also given you the articles just to remind you. We have hey, taste, tay, and tain, and the plural high, tone, taste, and tas. Right. Knowing our genitive singular vocab, we know that the stem of this noun is alpid, ending with the consonant delta. So let's decline this together. All right, nominative singular is alpis. All right, so we have amalgamation in the nominative singular. And what happens in the nominative singular also happens in the dative plural. So our dative plural is alpisin, and we have amalgamation that's also taken place there between the delta and the sigma. Our genitive singular is alpedos, dative alpedi, accusative alpeda. The plural forms, we have alpedes, genitive alpedon, and then the accusative plural alpedas. All right, so once again, the only irregularities that we've seen there are in the nominative singular and in the dative plural. And the rest of the patterns are quite consistent, as we've seen with sarx and charis. The next two examples of third declension nouns are somewhat unique compared to the ones that we've been doing previously. So I'll explain those differences as we go along. But the first example are nouns that end with is, eos. Right, and so when you see those endings, take into consideration that these nouns are normally feminine. They have feminine genders. But remember, in our lexical forms, we'll always have the article to assist us. So the example that I want to look at first is the example of polis, polios, hey, which means city. Now in the bottom right-hand corner here, I've given you three other examples of words that fall into this category. So we have here krisis, krisios, hey, which means judgment, dunamis, dunameos, hey, which means power, and pistis, pisteos, hey, which means faith. So the first reason why these third declension nouns are unique is because when we look at the set, they will follow the second patterns. So the nominative singular is still the sigma. The genitive singular is not the os, but the eos. The dative is the iota. The accusative is not the alpha, it's the nu. And then the plural forms, the nominative follows the ace, genitive own, dative sin, so those two are still consistent. And the accusative follows the ace ending. A second reason why this noun ending is unique is because although we've learned that third declension nouns end with consonants, these nouns end with vowels. All right, so that might throw you off a little bit, and that's why these ones are slightly unique. So for example, the actual stem of polis is poly. All right, so it ends with a iota. But what's also problematic for us, excuse me, is that this final iota often changes to an epsilon. So you can see there in the genitive singular, the iota has changed to an epsilon. In the genitive plural, the iota has also changed to an epsilon. and then the dative plural, the iota is changed to an epsilon. So I really like the advice that Clayton Croy provides. He says that it may be better simply to learn the endings as they occur rather than worry about their formation. So when it comes to these nouns that end in is and eos, it's better simply just to learn the endings according to this table that I've provided here, rather than worry too much about how the various cases are formed, all right, because they are quite tricky. So let's just go through them together very quickly. The nominative singular is polis, genitive singular is poleos, dative pole, accusative singular polin, nominative plural poles, genitive plural poleon, dative plural polesin, and the accusative plural is poles. Let me now introduce you to the second example of third declension nouns that are quite unique. And these are nouns that end with us, eo. So very similar to the previous one, except instead of the is, you have the us now. And these nouns are normally masculine as opposed to feminine. An example that I want to take a look at is basileus, basileos ha, and this means king. In the bottom right hand corner, I've given you 3 more examples of words that follow these endings. We have archerus, which is high priest, hierus, which is priest, and grammatus, which is grammar. Now, once again, these nouns follow the second patterns of the masculine feminine set. So the nominative here is the sigma again. The genitive is eos, dative is iota. The accusative returns to the alpha ending, and then the nominative plural is ace, genitive own, dative sin, and accusative ace. So once again, as I said previously, the reason why these nouns are unique is because their stem endings end with a vowel and not a consonant, as we would expect when coming to third declensions. And once again, there are a number of irregularities, such as contraction and various changes that take place here, that I want to just take the advice of Clayton Croy again and encourage you just to learn the endings and not worry too much about the formation of the various cases of this word. So let's just go through this very quickly. The nominative singular, the stem is basileu. All right, as you can see there's various changes where the upsilon has dropped out. So in the genitive singular, the upsilon has disappeared. In the dative singular, we have contraction. In the nominative plural, we have contraction. And in the dative plural and accusative plural, we have contraction. So quite a few changes that take place here. So the nominative singular is basileus, genitive singular basileos, dative singular basile, accusative singular basilea, nominative plural basileis, genitive plural basileon, dative plural basileusin, and accusative plural basileis. We have finally arrived to our second and third sets of the third declension nouns. And as I said previously, these sets involve neuter nouns. So let's have a look at the neuter A, or second set first, which is the more common neuter set endings. All right, so the nominative singular and the accusative singular have no endings. So if you have a look at this comment here at the bottom, as with all neuter nouns, pronouns, and adjectives, the nominative endings are identical to the accusative. And the second point here, in the neuter A pattern, the nominative singular, and therefore the accusative singular as well, cannot be predicted and must be memorized, as was the case with the masculine and feminine patterns. All right, so that just explains the nominative and the accusative singulars. The genitive singular ending is os, and the dative again is iota. The plural endings, the nominative and accusative plurals are the same. They are both alpha, and the genitive plural is own, and the dative plural is sin. So that's the same as the masculine feminine set that we saw previously. And then let's take a look at the neuter B or third set endings. So the nominative and accusative singular are the same, so they are os. The genitive singular is us, and the dative singular is iota. The plural endings, the nominative is eta, and the accusative plural is eta. The genitive is own, and the dative plural is sin. All right, so there are a few that are the same as the first set, but there are also quite a few changes, and you just need to take the time to memorize those for yourself. So within the neuter sets, we also have variations. So these third declension neuter nouns end with mat. So the example that we are going to decline is soma, somatos, ta. Right? So the ta reminds us that it is a neuter gender, and this word means body. So on the right hand side, let's look at our neuter A endings. All right, so the nominative singular and accusative singular, as well as the nominative plural and accusative plurals, are all the same. The genitive is os, dative is iota, genitive plural is own, and dative plural is sin. All right, so let's decline these together. So we see that the nominative singular is soma, and you would expect to have the tau at the end, but remember our third or fourth helpful hint was that a tau cannot stand by itself at the end of a word, so that is dropped away, and that's why we only have soma. So that's why we need to know the genitive singular form in order to know what the consonant was. So in the genitive singular, we have somatos, and we see there that the final consonant is a tau. All right, and we just add the os ending. The dative singular is somatai, and the accusative singular is also soma. And then the nominative plural is somata, as well as the accusative plural, which is also somata. The genitive plural is somatone, and the dative plural is somasin. And there you can see that amalgamation has taken place between the sigma and the tau. The tau is dropped off, and you're left with the sigma. And then there are other words that also follow these endings, which I've given you here. Let's take a look at those quickly. We have haima, haimatos ta, which means blood. Then we have rhema, rhematos ta, which means word. Next we have pneuma, pneumatos ta, which is spirit, wind, or breath. And then we have onoma, onomatos ta, which means name. And so all these words will be declined the same as we've just done previously with soma. Let's take a look at our final example of neuter nouns ending with os, us. So the example here is genos, genus, ta, which means race or kind. The stem is actually genes, and the sigma drops off. So these nouns will follow the neuter B pattern. So the singular endings again are os, us, e, and os, and the plural endings are eta, own, sin, and eta. And then there are just two more examples of nouns that will follow the neuter be pattern, and that is ethnos, ethnous ta, which means nation, and oros, orus ta, which means mountains. So let's quickly decline this noun. So we have ta genos, two, genus to, gene ta, genos. The plural, we have ta gene, tone, genon, tois, genesin, and ta gene. Before we wrap up the third declension nouns, there is one more rule that you need to know. But before we take a look at that rule, I want to remind you of those 4 helpful hints that I introduced you to earlier. The first one was memorize the nominative and genitive singular forms of third declension nouns. The second helpful hint is whatever happens in the nominative singular also happens in the dative plural. The third helpful hint was that a new falls away when it's followed by a sigma. And then the fourth helpful hint was that a tau falls away when it's followed by a sigma. And that fourth helpful hint actually comes into play here with this last rule. So let's take a look at it together. In the dative plural, so this only affects the dative plural, stems ending in alpha nu tau or epsilon nu tau or omicron nu tau drop the tau before the sigma. As in the future tense, the nu changes to an epsilon, which then contracts with the remaining vowel. So here are some of those changes that can take place with the alpha nu tau combination, the epsilon nu tau, and the omicron nu tau, with the dative plural case ending, and we end up with some of these changes, which I want to just encourage you to get familiar with. So let's practice one together using the alpha nu tau ending. So the example that we're going to look at is archon, which means ruler. And as you can see here, the stem has the omicron nu tau in it. And so the dative plural rule is going to come into place here. Also on the right hand side, these follow the masculine feminine sets. Alright, so you should be familiar with that by now. Let's quickly just decline this together. So the nominative singular is archon, genitive singular is archontos, dative singular archonti, accusative singular archonta, nominative plural archontes, genitive plural archonton, and the accusative plural archontas. So let's just quickly go back to the dative plural and see what happens there. So if you remember the rule, we said that the tau drops out before the sigma. The nu then changes to an epsilon, and the epsilon will then contract with the omicron, and that is why we have arcusin, because the diphthong is formed due to the contraction that has taken place. Alright, so that is slightly irregular, but the rest of the cases should be quite regular, and it's simply a matter of attaching the endings to the stem.
There was a student, had a friend, and Saucia was her name. Oh, third declension, masculine singular.
Hey, isn't masculine and feminine the same in the third declension?
Yeah, but there was no way I could fit the word feminine into the beat of that song. But I'll tell you what I'll do. To make it up to you, I'll say feminine in this next verse while we do the plural forms, and I'll even get a woman to sing it. Michelle!
Saucia has a last name too, and it is S-O-C-S, 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 S-O-C-S.
terrible. That sounded like a dying cat.
I kinda liked it.
That was bad.
Now Saucia has a cousin too, and his name is Aussie. Shh, Aussie, shh, shh, Aussie, shh, shh, Aussie, shh. Third declension, neuter, singular. Now Aussie has a last name too, and it is Aonsi, 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 Aonsi. Third declension, neuter, plural.
Mike, promise me you'll never sing that female voice again.
So let's go through our vocab for lesson 11. And most of these words you are already familiar with because of the examples that we did in today's lesson. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Let's go to the first one. Haima, haimatos ta means blood. Then we have I own, ionos ha, which means age. Then we have archon, archontos ha means ruler. Then we have basileus, basileos ha, which means king. Next we have genos, genus ta, race or kind. Next we have alpis, alpedos he, which means hope. Then we have mater, matros he, which means mother. Then we have nux, nuktos he, which means night. Then we have onoma, onomatos ta, which means name. Then we have pater, petros ha, which means father. Then we have pneuma, pneumatos ta, which means spirit, wind or breath. Then we have polis, polios he, which means city. Next we have rhema, rhematos ta, which means word. Second to last we have sarx, sarkos he, which means flesh. And finally we have soma, somatos ta, which means body. Right, so in all these examples, they are examples of third declension nouns. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to fit all the vocab on one slide, so let's go through these last four words together. We have soter, soteros ha, which is savior. Next we have phos, photos ta, which means light. Then we have charis, charitos he, which is grace. And lastly we have chair, chairos he, which is hand. So you can pronounce the key as a ch sound or as a key sound. So you could actually say the last two words as charis, charitos he, or chair, chairos he, which is hand. Let's take a look at our translation exercise for today. The Greek reads A, ekomen, alpida, en tois, logos tu, theu, haimon, ekomen, kai, charin. Alright, so let's pass each word together. First we have A. This is a conditional particle, which means if. The next word is a verb, ekomen, which is a present, active, indicative, first person plural, which means have. Alright, so that's actually used twice here. At the bottom we see here, ekomen, so we won't repeat that again. Then we have our third declension noun, alpida. So notice the alpha ending, which tells us that it is an accusative feminine singular, and it means hope. Then we have en, which is a preposition. It takes its object in the dative case, and when it does that, we translate it with in. Next we have tois, which is an article, dative, masculine, plural. We're just going to include it there as the. Then we have logos, which is the object of the preposition. So it's going to be in the dative case, masculine, plural, and it means words. Then we have another article, to, which is a genitive, masculine, singular, the. Then we have theou, which is a noun. It's genitive, masculine, singular, and it means God. Then we have our personal pronoun, haimon, which is a genitive, first person, plural, translated as our. We've done the verb. Then we have ka, which is a conjunction, meaning also. So normally it's translated and, but we're going to use also today. And then charin, which is also an example of a third declension noun. Notice the new has been included there, but the actual ending is the iota, chari, which tells us that this is a dative, feminine, singular, translated as grace. All right, so let's put this information together and see what our translation is. So using the information from our passing sheet in the previous slide, we can come up with this English translation, which says, we are having hope in the words of our God. We are also having grace. You could also maybe translate the kai as, and we are having grace. All right, so that's can be a personal preference there. So let's make some observations of the Greek text. Firstly, let's look at the verb echomen, which appears twice. Both times I've translated it as we are having. All right, so we are having, conveying the imperfective verbal aspect, which shows us that this is a ongoing, a continuous, a linear kind of action. And this is a verb that requires an object. So in the first time it's used, it takes its object in the accusative case. So alpida is here functioning as the direct object, and we translate it as hope. And the second time, it takes its object in the dative case, which is charin, showing us that gracia is functioning as the indirect object. And then finally, just to remind you again, the preposition en takes its object in the dative case, and that is why we have tois logos in the dative case. All right, so I hope that some of those observations were helpful to you. Please, I encourage you to go through this lesson again. Third declension nouns are a lot trickier and more difficult to learn. But if you can remember those 4 helpful hints that I gave you, as well as memorize the first, second, and third sets, then I have no doubt that you will make progress and in no time will master these nouns. So God bless you richly as you continue to study His Word and grow in the grace and knowledge of Christ. And I'll see you in the next lesson.